Hey everyone, this is Center Spacer Isaac Wagner here, talking about manga and light novels again. I took a pretty long break, not a well-deserved break. I hurt my mouth, so it was really hard to talk or even eat or anything, so I decided to take the time off. But because of that, it also means that I'm pretty far behind on not only showing you guys what I've gotten, but also talking about what I've gotten. So basically how it's going to work is I'm going to make also, just to shorten things out, I'm going to make a top 5 things I've read in the month of October. I will do my manga / light novel haul for November. The next few days after, or the week after, I'll probably try to accelerate the video pacing a little bit because we don't have a lot of November left at this point, and I don't want to get too far gone or be too far behind. And then I will do my November reading log, which the November reading log might be a little smaller. Just because I just wasn't feeling very well, which made me not want to read as much and everything. I have some stuff to talk about, and in this October one, instead of my last video was a really long video. It's really hard to edit really long videos like that, especially when you're working a full-time job and doing other things at the same time, trying to read all this manga and light novels that you buy. So I'm just gonna limit it to top 5, and I think I'm gonna try this out and see how it works. It should be making more easily digestible videos, and that's my hope at least. So I have the top 5 things, and this will be top 5 series because one of the series I read multiple of, but I think it's just easier talking about all of them at the same time. Basically, the criteria of how I choose the things on October is either things I read during the month of October, well, just things I read in October, really. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but that's how it is. Basically, I don't want to choose things that, like, I bought in October but didn't read till November, and I read them in November. I'm like, oh, okay, let's go put this in October 1. So basically, it's anything I read in October, including older stuff or rereads or anything like that. No rereads on this list, at least. I still got a ton of new stuff to go through. That's so much. I've bought so much stuff that I can't wait to show you guys more later. But for now, let's talk about the top 5 things top 5 manga and light novels I've read in October. So the very first one is a light novel, and this is Tearmoon Empire. Volume 1. This is a interesting one because back when I was trying to get into light novels and manga, I was like, let me try to take a look at what everyone else is saying. So I found some other YouTubers and some other people that were talking about light novels, and one that came up kind of a lot was Tearmoon Empire. So I don't know if anyone's read it before, but basically the premise is that a princess named Mia has been imprisoned for several years because of a revolt against the empire she was born into and she's royalty of. There was a revolution and they overthrew their government, and then they imprisoned her, and then we kind of fast forward to the day where she gets executed. The guillotine comes and slices her head off. And then we wake up in the past, and it turns out it's like almost like a ReZero situation where she has gone back to the past with her memories intact, and so her objective is to try and prevent the beheading from happening. It's a great premise. It's a really interesting idea, and what I didn't really realize is that this is a hilarious book. This is by far the funniest book I've ever read. To be fair, I haven't got a lot of comedy light novels, maybe like Haruhi, Suzumiya. I think the first 2, which is I think Melancholy and Sigh, I've read. They're pretty funny, but they're kind of pretty slow as well. While this is really fast. Tearmoon Empire is really fast, but it's really far ahead. And it really makes me interested how the series progresses, because we already cover a lot of ground to prevent her beheading, but kind of the thing that the novel establishes is that she's not really doing this out of the goodness of her heart, like all the things she's doing. She's doing all this just to avoid getting murdered again, to execute it again, from getting revolted against again, so she can continue living a nice, happy life. And so the way it frames the story and her thoughts and how she arrives at things, it's a very solid, like almost omniscient view where you kind of get a perspective into her head a little bit, but you don't deal solely with her perspective. In fact, the narrator feels like his own character, or her own character, their own character. Where they almost play like the Kaguya-sama straight man narrator, where they just, all this crazy stuff between these characters are happening. Narrators like, everyone here is stupid, don't believe anything they're saying, or they don't know what they're talking about, don't believe them, they're all dumb. And it's very similar narrator here, and it's hilarious just getting inside perspective or a more like independent perspective. Like this is what this character's thinking about this character, but we all know it's horseshit. Like, it's basically that, and it's really funny. I'm probably not doing a lot of justice, honestly, but it's a really hilarious book. One thing I'll do for this reading log, and I forgot to put in the beginning, is I'm going to go into the spoilers for everything I'm talking about, and I'll include timestamps and everything in the video, hopefully, where if you haven't read it or you don't care, if you haven't read it or you're not there yet, then hopefully you won't get spoiled. I think these reading log videos, especially if I talk about the same series over and over again, just me going over the premise over and over again, is not going to be very interesting. So there's not a lot of spoilers to talk. It's the very first volume, but like I said, we cover a lot of ground in this very first novel, so where it's like, oh, I don't think she's going to get executed at this point. Like, she's kind of solved all the major problems, it seems like. So I'll be really curious where volume 2 goes, but it's so funny, so clever, and so hilarious, with such a great premise that I'm really excited and interested to see where it goes. Unfortunately, there isn't a volume 2 yet, a volume 2 out yet. I believe it's in December, hopefully, and hopefully it doesn't get delayed with all the light novel and manga delays that have been happening. Because I'm really excited to see where the story goes and how they push the envelope, because I think it's already a really clever, really interesting story. I highly recommend it so far. It's a great first volume, especially if you like comedy, fantasy, more medieval elements. There's not a lot of like magic or anything like that. It's pretty medieval style, but with, you know, the anime code and paint and everything. Again, there's executions and talks about blood and everything, so it's not like super light and fluffy. But it's a story about trying to have a light and fluffy life and her fighting for it. And I think it's really funny and interesting, especially when she needs to swallow her pride a little bit, or Mia needs to think outside the box or think besides herself, even though in her mind she's like, I don't want to do anything that's happening here. I just want to go and eat some pancakes or have a great time or whatever. But she has to sometimes do the hard work. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic. Where like characters like ReZero of Subaru, he does it because he wants to be a hero. She doesn't want to be a hero, but she has to do the things that she wants. Mia wants to be able to live her life comfortably. So I think it's a really interesting character, really fun situation scenario, and an incredible narrator that evokes Kaguya-sama's narrator, their straight man narrator. So I highly recommend it. It's a great first volume. Excited to read more of it. All right, and next is a series of books here, volumes 2 through 4 of My Dress Up Darling. I read the first volume. I loved it. I'm sure you guys heard me talk about it, or at least heard me talk about it past in a previous manga haul or reading log video. But if you haven't, this is basically about a story of a guy who loves to sew and make clothes for dolls and paint dolls and everything like that. Very feminine stuff. And then he's been embarrassed and ashamed about it all of his life. And finally, he meets a girl, Marin. She is a cosplayer, and she wants to cosplay her favorite characters. Turns out her favorite characters are from either anime, manga, or from adult video games. And so he gets the opportunity to sew her clothes for her and create clothes for her. And she gets to kind of enable him to have a healthy environment where he can express his creativity and his passion for things like this. Makeup, sewing, all this other stuff that comes to cosplaying. And it's a really deep look into cosplay. I learned a lot actually from it, just like fake, like not like how to change your eye shapes, or like all sorts of interesting stuff, how makeup works in certain circumstances, like heat factors. I never really thought about how hot like these clothing are, and what you would do to try and reduce the fatigue on that stuff. It's a fascinating look into cosplay and everything. And I will say one thing, even though I love it, it's very wholesome. The characters are great, especially Marin. I really like her, or Marin. I'm probably saying it literally different every single time I'm saying it, but I really love her perspective on everything. And she's a character that, again, this is spoilers, but all this is gonna be spoilers, like I said before. She talks about, she really likes the main character and pretty quickly falls in love with him. And so basically everything from this point is her trying to seduce him and to woo him and to get him to ask her out. And so I think it's a really funny premise. It's a very wholesome setting. I really like the light, fluffy romance stuff. It's especially if you have a long day at work like I do. You just kind of want to get cozy and warm and get like a warm blanket on and read this warm little story about these fluffy little characters. And I learned something about cosplay at the same time, so I can't really get too mad about it. I will say there's not a lot of conflict or drama. So I've caught up to it, unfortunately. I wish there was more to read, but there isn't. But like, there's not some overarching story. It just like seems so far that he's just creating costumes for her. They're meeting people along the way, and these side little characters, which help expand his world and Marin's world, and kind of develops their little relationship with each other. It's just very cute, very warm, very fluffy. But if you like something that's a little bit more plot driven and directed, you're probably not going to be super satisfied. But if you like rom-coms, especially the warm and fluffy kind, this is an easy one. Like you may have seen on there, it says mature content, adult. Like don't read unless you're an adult. There's a little bit of nudity in one of the volumes, but it's not substantial. And it's not super provocative or anything, so I'm really not sure why it's there necessarily, because I don't know, I don't remember, but the first volume of Hell's Paradise had nudity in it. I don't think that had a mature rating on it. I could be wrong. I know Berserk does, but Berserk has a lot of more fucked up stuff than My Dress Up Darling does. So I highly recommend this manga. It's great art, great characters, fun little story, fun little warm story, not something deep or change your outlook on life or give you a new perspective on certain things, but you learn a little bit about cosplay and you get these cute little scenarios and with some great art. So how can you go wrong with that? All right, next up is going to be a weird one. I have a volume 1 of Goblin Slayer, the manga. Goblin Slayer is a really conflicted story for me because I watched the anime first, and despite how blah the animation style is, and despite how inconsistent the tone was, and how the quality differed greatly from one episode to the next, and the pretty rough looking 3D models and 3D fight scenes, some were cool, but a lot of it looked kind of weird. I thought there was something really interesting about like the when the story was consistent, very dark, very grounded, very mature storyline without a lot of plot conveniences or anything. And also Goblin Slayer is just a super cool character. So again, the premise is this fantasy world where it's taking a more mature tone with it. So there's still magic, there's still all your sword and sorcery stuff, but monsters horrifically murder people. Characters get violated in a lot of really horrifying ways. And it's just a really grounded look. After reading stuff like Berserk, I think there's a good middle ground that Goblin Slayer occupies, where you have like the Sword Art Online style fantasy. Technically Sword Art Online, it's a science fiction story, but you know what I mean in terms of like that fantasy setting where it's a very anime, very light fantasy setting. I think, and then the other end is Berserk, which just has horrifying shit happening, and I think Goblin Slayer occupies a maybe middle right, closer to Berserk, but nowhere near to the levels of Berserk. There are certain horrible things that happen in terms of sexual assault and everything that happens, but it's not as graphic or as vivid or as emotionally devastating as Berserk. It just is like a fact about the world, essentially. The first season of the anime was rough, but I still liked it. The movie was bad, and season 2 got announced. So I'm really curious to see how it goes. But when I did some research, because watching it, I was like, I feel like there's more to it. I think there's more to the story than what the anime has. And I think a lot of people told me online that that's true as well. But when I tried to get a perspective on should I do the light novel or the manga, I know the light novel is the original material, but I heard the manga is really popular as well. That's when I first heard about Goblin Slayer, was the manga. The opinions online were really divided, or were basically like, they're like, either one's fine, or read both, like they're both unique. And so I kind of want a more definitive perspective on it. So I think I'm going to go through the manga and the light novel. So for right now, I've only read the first volume of the manga. Substantially better than the show. There's a lot more graphic material and scenes in it, so again, this is a very adult book, but the tone is a lot more consistent, especially in the show, where they would go from some horrifying shit for the first couple episodes to like, oh, here's some like slice of lifey stuff with this light fluffy music and all these light characters and everything. You're like, this doesn't feel right. For me, the original argument I made during when Goblin Slayer was a huge controversy was, yes, the things that happen in Goblin Slayer are pretty fucked up, and they show it, and it's pretty fucked up. But as long as they hold a consistent tone, and that's a consistent tone piece for the rest of it as like a setting, then I'm okay with it because they're being honest and straight with it. Berserk's the same way, where Berserk is consistently tonally the same, even though there's some jokes here and there or lighter moments. Its general tone is still 90% dark and mature. Goblin Slayer felt like 50-50. So it felt really rough and awkward when you go from really dark shit to really light shit to really dark shit again. The manga is much more consistent. To be fair, it's only a fraction of the story, not even the whole story that's told in the anime, so maybe that changes. But so far it's tonally more consistent, where when we get from one story arc to the next story arc within the volume, it feels a lot more cohesive and doesn't feel as jarring when it starts flipping between it. And those moments I remember in the anime that were lighter and had a lighter tone to them still have heaviness and darkness in them a little bit better in the manga. So I'm really curious how if the light novel is true about this as well. What I will say is advantage for the manga is that the art is incredible, especially anything that depicts Goblin Slayer being a Goblin Slayer and fucking shit up. The art looks incredible. It's fantastic. And I can't really there's moments in the anime that I wish looked better because the animation was so mid and the 3D models were so rough. I'm really excited to see this brought to life in the manga and the light novels in terms of the narrative perspective. I'm really happy happy is the wrong word. I'm really satisfied, and I really enjoyed that first volume of Goblin Slayer. And I'm really curious to see where it goes from here on. It's really out of stock constantly, which is strange, but I'm looking forward to getting it whenever I see volumes come up, especially, and the light novel as well, which I'm sure is a lot easier because words are hard. All right, next we have a surprise one, since I did not talk about this, and I think Goblin Slayer might be the same way. I didn't really talk about this. I got that at the end of October, so it didn't get included in my manga haul video. And same with this, I got volume 2 of Goodnight, Punpun. If you remember what I said about the first volume, I thought Punpun, the first volume, Goodnight Punpun, I didn't really see the appeal of it, honestly. Maybe it was just the setting or the characters at the time, covering them when they were very young. I just didn't see what people were talking about, where it's a very dark, very grim, very depressing, very funny story. But it's constantly out of stock. Suddenly I had an opportunity to get it, jumped on it, because might as well. People say it's amazing, so I'm trying to stick to it. And I will say, after volume 2, I'm fully bought in. I'm very excited to see where the story goes. We have a time skip of several years, I believe. I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head, unfortunately, but we see Punpun. I think he's in middle school at this point. This all could be wrong, but basically he's older now. He has some distance from the characters, including the girl he has a crush on. And we kind of see his developing darkness, which we don't really get a lot of in the original story, the first volume. But the second volume, you get a lot of his darker thoughts, self-deprecation, depression, refusal to believe anything will be better than what it is, suspecting people. Funny enough, things I've felt before, where I kind of doubt the whole world around me in terms of people are only nice to me because they have to. People only pay attention to me because they feel sad for me. Seeing these thoughts come to Punpun, and how the funny bird characters, where Punpun and his family are depicted as bird people, and the funny expressions they make, is a good counterpoint. I know it sounds weird because I was just criticizing Goblin Slayer for having fun moments or light moments, but Punpun exists in a reality, and so seeing this bird character make these really funny faces because something really depressing or dark happened is funny, especially when you've lived things like that, in terms of some of the thoughts that go through Punpun's head, where he thinks about, oh, I like this girl, or I hate this guy because he's dating the girl that I like, or any of these other things, because he felt that before, or something similar. And seeing it from an objective perspective is funny, and the art knows it's funny, the mangaka knows it's funny and draws it like that, even though the thoughts in Punpun's head are really dark and disturbing. You also get a really deep perspective into his uncle, who has a really fascinating story and some really dark and depressing moments in his life in particular. and it made it really interesting to consider his perspective on things like cheating on his girlfriend, the girlfriend he wanted to marry or who was forcing him to feel like he had to get married, who he was cheating with, this new girl, how he can forgive himself or find redemption. Will he find redemption and potential to find redemption? Because I see Punpun and I see a younger version of me with these dark thoughts in my head. And then I see the uncle, which is my current age, whereas it's this very like retro, maybe retrospective is a great word, where you're like, am I able to be forgiven? Is there hope for me? Can I find happiness still? Or is it all mean nothing? And it ends at a point where maybe the uncle, it's impossible for him to find happiness, or not to find, or he can't find happiness the way he thinks he does. And so it's a really fascinating cliffhanger. And I'm really curious to learn more. Right now, the uncle is my favorite character. Maybe it's my age, but I relate more to him. But I'm really also curious to see where Punpun goes. Because you can see, when people say it's a really dark, depressing, fucked up book, I think you're starting to get the beginnings of that. And the scene where he had the uncle's, I think it was clay. I think they make clay pots and everything. Him climbing into the furnace to grab a pot because it's the most beautiful when it's still being formed and everything. Some of that scene and symbology and the symbology and the thematic elements there were incredible. There's some incredible imagery and incredible writing going on here. So it'll be a story that I'm really excited to read more of and reread it once I've had everything to kind of tie everything together, because I already feel like it's a story that's going to be self-referential. It's going to go back to moments in the past. So I'm all bought in 100%. Want to read more Punpun. Gonna finish all Punpun. It's fantastic. I can see what people are talking about. Hopefully the tone, the consistency, the quality is consistent throughout. I'm excited to see more of it. All right, and lastly, number 5, volume 4 of 86. Again, like I said, there's going to be spoilers. The cover itself is a spoiler. You've been warned. But basically, as far as I can tell, the anime is going to cover after the end of the first season, books 1 through 3. And that's going to be the first 2 major arcs. And volume 4 is the next major arc after that. So potentially season 2 material if it gets a season 2, which it should, because 86 might be the best show on TV right now. Best anime on TV right now, but one of the best shows on TV, period, regardless. Again, spoilers, I'm going to talk about volume 4, which is further ahead than even the anime we'll probably get to, at least for now. We finally get some good Lena and Shin material. We eat good over here. We've been having to deal with these characters, pining for each other, never even meeting each other. We get that tease at the end of book 1 that they're going to meet each other, and we had to read 2 more books just to get to that point. And then we finally got to book 4, where we can finally get some good material between them. And it's just, the romance moments are cute. It's great. The slice of life moments at the beginning, the first half, or I'd say the first third, it's good eating. We eating good over here if you're shipping Shin and Lena, because they're just great characters. I really love them. I love their relationship with each other. It works. It feels natural. There's great chemistry there. And so we're eating good out here. 86 book 4 has got us covered on that. And the way that 86 almost felt like a thing after book 3. I'm like, they probably don't have to make it. She probably doesn't. The writer doesn't have to write anymore, because it feels like a pretty cohesive story. Sure, you don't get big answers to some of the Legion stuff or conclusion to the story, but like thematically and what they're going for, like it feels pretty on point there. But book 4 blows me away in how far they push the story, push the themes, push certain developments and characters, introducing the Legion type, the new stealth Legion that's meant to directly counter Shin, how invisibility is handled in the world, how that's conducted, the new Legion threat in terms of now all of the models are black sheep essentially now. I think they're called black sheepdogs at the end. All the horrible shit that the Legion's done to experiment on people to get to that point, how they got to that point, what that means for the characters in terms of combat in the future and involving scenarios regarding the Legion. And then that final plot twist at the end with Shin being beckoned towards a potential Legion commander, the creator of all the Legion. I truly did think by the end of volume 3 of 86, I'm like, okay, we're just going to stretch this out. We're going to just keep recycling this stuff. We'll have some good moments here and there, but I think we got the main core of the story done, but that's not true. We did get a main core of the story done with books 1 through 3, but book 4 at least presents a new major core for the story, a new major storyline. with new big thematic elements and plot twists. And it seems really smart and really well done and really well developed so far. I really hope it pans out. I'm right in the middle of book 5 right now. I'm taking a bit of a break right now because I'm not a military otaku or a military fan, and so like a lot of action scenes melt my brain a little bit. I like psychological stuff. I like light fluffy romance stuff. I like horror stuff. I'm not a big fan of like action stuff, because especially in books it just kind of all blends together in my head, and it's really hard for me to visualize the action moments, especially when there's not a lot of story going on. It's just action for the sake of action, or it's like, yeah, let's talk about how this artillery cannon works or how these guns work. I'm like, I really don't care. I'm here for the characters and for the narrative, not for like this military porn shit. And 86 loves its military porn shit. Not to disparage people who like that stuff, it's just not really for me. And so the best, and I think it's great in the anime because it visualizes it better. The action scenes play a lot better in terms of seeing it animated, and because we can skip past most of the stuff and we get straight to the story, while the book likes to like marinate in the military stuff and like the technology and the logistics of things, where I'm just here for the Shin and Lena material and to see the Legion developments. Not to say the book's bad or anything. I do think I have a consistent problem with 86 where they take these symbols or these images of characters for Lena the Silver Bells, Shin the Headless Reaper, Shin's adoptive father, or essentially the guy who runs the not the Empire more, I think it's called a Federacy, or it's a Federacy, I think. He resembles a dragon, but they just kind of say those things without like really earning the image. It just says he sits there like a dragon. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, describe the situation, describe a scenario, describe a stance. How is he like a dragon? Or they say like Shin is like a Reaper searching the battlefield for his head. No, he really doesn't seem like that. He has a head, so why is he searching for something he already has? Maybe I'm reading it too literally, but they also repeat these images over and over again, like the sound of silver bells as Lena appears, or when she says something. I'm like, what do you mean? Her voice doesn't sound like silver bells. Like, I've watched the anime, I know she doesn't sound like that, so what are you talking about? So it's not the best written thing. I don't think it's badly written. I just think it's really repetitive sometimes. That's why I'm kind of in the middle of a like kind of break right now of it. But I'm still really excited. Amazing plot developments. We eating good on the Shin and Lena material, the coupling material there. But yeah, that's 86 volume 4. All right, and that covers it. Those are the top 5 best things I've read, best light novels and manga I read for October of 2021. Again, it's a pretty late video, so I apologize about that. You'll get a manga haul video pretty shortly after, because, and this is going to cover basically everything I didn't show you for the October haul and the November haul, just to make sure you see everything. So it's going to be very big and probably a lot shorter in terms of what I show you and how I show you things, because I don't want like 40-minute long videos or 30-minute long videos, especially if I can avoid it. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I can stay a more consistent schedule. Sorry I was gone for so long, but hopefully that does not happen in the future. So thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think about these books, if you read them yourself, or if you have any questions for me about them that I can answer for you. Like the video if you like the content, and subscribe if you want to see more of it. I hope you do. I'd like to see you around, hear from you, and kind of share our passion in this medium. So thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.